that there's like these people called judges, and they go out and they read the law and they decide the cases, and there's some sort of regular process that goes on that makes some sense. No, not at all, okay? Here's the statute. Here's the statute that is alleged to authorize the entire metadata, so-called metadata collection program. And it says that the director of the FBI can make an application for an order to this secret court. Now, right off the bat, you've got a problem, because if you've got a secret court, no one can see its decisions, no one can hold them accountable at all. That's one of the reasons the decisions are going to be as crazy as I'm going to show to you. And the law becomes secret. The law itself is secret. And no one's allowed to reveal the arguments that are even made. And we only know about this stuff from people who leak it. But I digress. Come back to Section 215. The director can make an application for the production of tangible things to protect against terrorism, and each application has to include a statement of facts to show that these things that the FBI is getting are relevant to an authorized investigation, and the statement will work automatically if they're looking at a foreign power or agent of a foreign power and all this kind of. It looks really good. It looks like, yeah, we got a dangerous terrorist here, and the FBI fills out some form. Here's our dangerous terrorist. Here's our investigation. We want this stuff that's relevant to the investigation, right? Anybody can read this, unless they're a secret judge, okay? But what happened instead? Well, here's what the government said in August 2013. Well, it meets the relevance standard because there are reasonable grounds to believe that if we collect everything that's happening in the entire country, and then we dig around in it, we might find something, okay? This is what passes for legal reasoning now in the foreign intelligence, courts, because nobody was watching them, and because what has happened now is we have become a country where when a government lawyer walks into court, whatever he says, the judge just sort of says, okay, thank you, sir, may I have another? And that's how we get things like this happening. Now, there's a board that analyzed this argument, and it's sort of humorous. They issued their report about a month ago, and they commented on 4 specific reasons that the government's interpretation was nuts. And they said, first of all, the whole idea was you need records, you go collect those records for that thing. No authorization whatsoever to collect the records in bulk. Second, they noted that the relevance argument was insane. And third, they said, look, what about this? The statute says that the FBI can do this. This doesn't say jack about the NSA. Well, God, it doesn't matter. Words, it's just words. It's completely and utterly illegal. But it says in the newspaper, well, the NSA's response is, that's just what a few lawyers think, Because part of what is so sick and wrong about this country now is that we've been trained to think that there are experts out there who are these, mighty, omniscient, and perfectly, they're rational, they have no self-interest at all, they're just there to protect us, and that they're going to tell us how things are, and we can trust them. And if they say relevance means that we can collect everything and then figure out why it's relevant later, that must be... People have got to start thinking for themselves. Now, you might think, okay, well, hey, this is just about, collecting some data, I don't care about this stuff, okay? But, once the law begins to rot, it begins to rot with respect to everything. And so now we have a government that says it's okay to kill you without any process whatsoever if we think that it will save human life, okay? Now, we think you're a terrorist, we're just going to kill you. And again, there's a Department of Justice, which is now the Department of Injustice, has a whole paper explaining why this is true. Well, we recognize there's no private interest more weighty than a person's interest in his life, but that interest must be balanced against the interest of the United States in forestalling the threat of violence and death. And so, hey, we can just do it. We can just decide when you need to die, and we'll kill you, and you can forget about due process because we're telling you what due process means, and due process means that there isn't any process. That's where we are going to now. Everything you send through the post office, they take a picture of it. Postcard, envelope, and we only know this because occasionally little clues show up in affidavits that are filed in court. But no one covers this, and no one explains its implications. Your car is watching you too now. Over 90% of cars now, the new cars, will watch how fast you're driving, whether you're wearing your seatbelt, whether you're accelerating, deaccelerating, and they'll record all this information. And as of December, there's a proposed regulation out to make this mandatory for all the cars so that your cars can be watching you too. They're tapping all the telecommunications. You know, you've heard a lot about Edward Snowden, but this was known long before Edward Snowden. This was known back in 2005 when one of the engineers who built the room behind this door came out and told everybody about it. And he said, hey, wait a minute. The government has hired me to build this entire room full of sophisticated equipment to tap into the highest volume telecommunication trunks in the country. And what's up with that? But nobody paid much attention. And the room's still there, and they're still tapping. And they're tapping all over the world. Now, they have a formal program. The program is called PRISM. And they've gone around to all of these companies, Microsoft, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, and every one of these companies has collaborated with the government. Not one of them has stood up to the government. When a company tries to stand up to the government will put it out of business, and that's what happened to one of the smaller email companies that said, hey, we want to send emails that you can't read. The answer is, we'll put you out of business. No law, no process, nothing. You're down, we'll take you down, you're dead. And so they can listen to everything that is going on, everything that is digital, email, chat, videos, photos, file transfers. It's all there. It's all being recorded all the time through this PRISM program. They have here's where it starts to get sort of sinister. Who are they spying on? Is this all random and it just sits there? The picture is, it just sits there in a computer and piles up, and then lo and behold, when there's a terrorist and we have specific reason to suspect somebody, then we'll go in and we'll get them. That is a damned lie. We know that's a lie because the whistleblowers who come out have told us this. And here's somebody who used to work for the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Agency, and he says, I had my hand on the paperwork. They went after high-ranking military officers, members of Congress, Senate, House, lawyers, law firms, judge who's sitting on the Supreme Court. Now, take your time to wrap your head around this, what this really means. If all of the people we are electing, if all of our leaders are subject to this constant, pervasive spying, who has the power here? You know, Arthur Conan Doyle was the author of Sherlock Holmes. And Arthur Conan Doyle used to say that anyone who reached the age of 40 had a skeleton in their closet. And he was at a dinner party one time, and he says this. And they say, oh, no, no. And so they pick some guy, this fine, upstanding Christian gentleman, as it says in the book, and they send him a telegram. All is discovered. Flee at once. And the guy was never seen again. And there's jokes about this. You send out 10 of these telegrams. All is discovered. Flee at once. And 10 people disappear. But the point is, everyone, especially by the time they're 40 or 50 years old or get up to the Supreme Court, they've got things they don't want people to see. And as a lawyer practicing in the courts, I see more and more strange decisions all the time. You know, the decision upholding Obamacare says in the first section that Obamacare is not a tax. It can't be a tax because if it's a tax, the court doesn't have jurisdiction. And then in the last section it says, oh, it is a tax and that's why it's constitutional. The person who wrote that, you know, who knows what they had on it? Maybe that's why he fled to Malta immediately after writing it. So, what limits the government? What limits their ability to do this? This thesis I will advance tonight is the only thing that limits it is the technological power and capabilities of the government, and those are expanding by leaps and bounds. Now, there have been a lot of attempts to estimate the technological powers of the government. This is from an affidavit filed by a former NSA engineer who's talking about the new data facility in Utah. And he says, even if it's built with the ordinary commercial technology, we're talking yottabytes or exabytes of data that can be built. Now, there have been other people saying he's exaggerating a little bit. Maybe he's only off by a factor of 10. But what does being off by a factor of 10 mean in this context? You all know what 1,000 megabytes is. It's a gigabyte. 1,000 gigabytes is a terabyte. We can all go out and buy drives for that. 1,000 terabytes is a petabyte. 1,000 petabytes is an exabyte. 1,000 exabytes is a zettabyte. Think about this. The entire global internet traffic for an entire year, every bit, every packet, every 0 and 1 is only about a zettabyte. It hasn't hit a zettabyte yet. And they're building the equipment to store this much, and some of these people think that they're going to be up to yottabytes, which is a 1 followed by 24 zeros, roughly speaking, for the engineers in the crowd. Now, it's not just that they're building these data storage facilities, they are also building an immense technological empire that can compromise every single device that we have. This, for example, is a device, and there's catalogs of them now. And one of the things that Snowden has released is the catalogs. And these catalogs are all about 6 or 7 years old. And they're hundreds of pages long. And they're like a shopping list for how to break into any device or any software on the planet. And I'll show you a few pages here from the German newspapers. This one, for example, is how you get in a computer. And you might think, oh, well, you know, I can always control my computer. I don't have to connect it to the internet. I could erase the hard drive, right? Erasing the hard drive does no good. This particular technology implants the hard drive firmware to gain execution through master boot record substitution. So you can wipe your drive, it doesn't make any difference, the government is still there. You got an iPhone? They've got a special technology for that. It's a software implant, and they explain how all that works. They've got hardware too. You don't even have to be hooked up to the internet. They have a catalog of bugs, 50 pages long, and the beauty of these things, the technological genius of them, is they don't even emit any radio frequency energy. They sit there in your thing, and then they beam some radar on it, and it bounces back, and the information comes back to the government without you being able to detect anything that is going on at all. And they have them for hundreds of different devices. The technology is even sneakier than that. Not only do they have all this hardware, they have their own giant server farms. This is called the TAO Fox Acid server. And what this server does is they can pretend to be any website. And they have the whole internet wired now, so that if they pretend to be a website, and you're sitting out there, and you're surfing, they can pretend to be the website that you're going to, and then they can get back to you before the other one does. And so they are constantly impersonating people and essentially defrauding people about who is what on the internet. Who knows? It could always be the government because of the quantum technology. And so they can get into everything. They also have a whole program called interdiction. Interdiction is, if you go out and buy a computer, they insinuate themselves in with the manufacturer sends them the computer, they put the chip in it, they send it out to you, and you're bugged, and this is, again, a giant bureaucratic level thing. This is not just Agent Q and James Bond, this is like the DMV, with hundreds of people out doing this stuff all the time, not subject to any control at all, and outside any notion of law whatsoever. Now, if you or I did this, this would be a felony, okay? There is a statute, 18 United States Code Section 1030, that prohibits unauthorized access into computers. And although the statute was only supposed to protect the people the government cared about, itself and the banks, I'm not kidding, the statute actually says it's the bank computers and the government computers that are supposed to be covered, but the courts quickly decided that everything's connected to everything, so all the computers are covered, and so getting into any computer in an unauthorized way is a felony. So we have essentially thousands and thousands of felonies going on all the time, never prosecuted. But let some individual like Aaron Swartz, who killed himself earlier this year, go into MIT's computers and download a few thousand scientific papers for one reason or another. They'll prosecute him, 60 counts of felonies, 10 years a count, he'll die in prison. Because again, there's no law anymore. There's a government that does whatever it wants, and a people that can't do anything without committing a felony.